Hi everyone and welcome back. I'm about to show you some of the independent test review that students can do on their own. Uh, we're going to go through two different tests. One that is a very well-known test, the ACT, and look at what Shmoop has put together for their test prep area there. And then we're also going to take a look at one of the lesser known tests and see the difference or the contrast in resources provided. Not all test prep is created equal, even in Shmoop. And so we're going to take a look at what's available for students to use independently. And then in the next video or in the next module, we'll show teachers how you can guide some of this practice or keep track of student practice and data if you wanted to set up some sort of incentive or reward for students going through that test prep. I am assuming that you can get to schools.shmoop.com. That's where I am looking at my dashboard here on the screen. We used in District 7 the Schoology single sign-on button, available only on the Schoology homepage to get here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to high school. I'm going to highlight over college readiness and I'm going to click ACT. Now the first time that this comes up, it didn't do it this time. There's going to be a little bit of a product tour. If you'd rather skip my video and just click through this, it gives you a pretty good idea. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about each of these components. The first thing that Shmoop asks you to do is pick from one of the national test dates. They keep track of when the ACT is offered nationwide. If you do that, it's going to basically build a timeline for you in some other areas that we'll take a look at later. The to-do list on the homepage is a pretty good rundown of what students should do. First, starting with the diagnostic, and what Shmoop does there is condense one of the sections of the test into fewer than what is normally offered, but gives you an idea of which of these four areas of the ACT, for example, you're a little bit weak in, so it can recommend what you should practice. This will also give you a unscientific projection of where your score may end up. So do take those seriously so that you can kind of get an idea of how hard you need to work on your test prep. As I'm scrolling down, there is something down here called Math Shack, but we'll go through that as we go through the top bar up at the top. Within the ACT, they have review topics. So if you take a look at each of the sections, English, math, reading, science, and then the writing, they're going to go into all of the types of math that are covered in those areas. What a lot of students in high school end up doing is needing to go back to some of the prior areas that they covered. So if they're in pre-calc, for example, students need to brush up on their geometry, trig, or algebra, because those are things that they may have passed already in their curriculum 2 or 3 years ago. In reading, they do give you different types of passages to work with and some guides there. So these are the overall topics, and what they look like is strategies as well as some practice items that you can use in that section. Now, under the Drill tab, drills are designed for you to practice those question types over and over. So, for example, here in English, with the punctuation, you can practice specifically on apostrophes. It's going to give you the answers at the end here, but you can also mark items that you know that you're guessing. And so when you go to score the test, it tells you the results, but then also reminds you as to kind of what things you didn't feel strong about, and then gives you the explanation as to why, as well as a supplemental video. Now these videos are all coming from Shmoop, they're not from YouTube, so teachers and students can rely on these working on student devices. Going back across, the video tab has the videos categorized into the areas of the test, which is really convenient. Then there are full-length practice exams. Notice how many there are in the ACT. There are 7, and these are full length. They're going to start a timer when you start the test, and you're also going to see exactly how many questions are in this section. So it is a full practice. Now, the reports area is where you can kind of get an idea of where your practice or your diagnostics are leading you. So these practice exams, things like that, once I start filling in or completing some of these things, I'm going to get an idea as to whether or not I'm improving. So if I took the English diagnostic and it scored me, a certain ACT projection, once I go back and take the practice ACT English test, I might start seeing some growth. I might see maybe a little stagnation, or I might go back up and down. That's why there are extra practice exams, so that you can tell whether or not the strategy you're going through by using the review topics, by using the videos or the drills is actually working. So the saved reports is how you can tell you're doing your best. Now, Math Shack, we mentioned this when I was on the dashboard page for the ACT, but Math Shack is a self-adapting, unlimited math practice. So once I complete the diagnostic, okay, Math Shack does some estimating as to what types of problems I really need to be practicing and sends me unlimited practice sets in that area. So let's say that it identifies that my geometry is not that great. It's going to help adapt to my learning and throw me through geometry practice that gets harder as I get better. So trying to move you up through that advanced areas of the math. So these are all the resources for ACT. Now I'd like to go back to my Shmoop dashboard, and let's take a look at one of the lesser known tests in under college readiness, just to kind of see how things are laid out. Let's take a look at ACCUPLACER. ACCUPLACER is a test that's being used more often by community colleges, and that's to place students in certain levels of classes in community college, whether you need remediation or whether you can kind of bypass some of the requirements in the first year of a community college. So notice how I don't have nearly as many options along the top. I also can't set my date because ACCUPLACER is administered by the community colleges. So Shmoop doesn't really have a good idea as to when ACCUPLACER is given. But they do have some practice exams here. They have a diagnostic, which will tell you roughly where you need to work on. The topics and drills are still also available. So if I take a look at arithmetic, for example, these are some of my basic math functions, adding and subtracting whole numbers and functions. And then as I move across, I get to some of that college level math. ACCUPLACER is a little bit different test. It adapts to what you answer right and then gives you harder problems as you go along. I'm going to click the My Profile to go back to the overall Shmoop dashboard. And now we're going to look at the advanced placement curriculum and practice items that are available. This is probably the most used resource in South Carolina, and that's for the advanced placement preparations. Let's take a look at AP Human Geography. When I get to the page, again, I might be offered a tour. Notice how I don't have those dates available, but I do have review topics, drills, and practice exams. So these are full-length practice exams. There are 3 of them offered by Shmoop. They don't have a projection, really, for how you will score. They haven't really done a lot of analysis of their practice exams in alignment to the actual test because those scores vary every year depending on how the written portion is graded. Now, what I really like to show students for independent practice, because students do take a lot of big cumulative tests for each of the units in an AP course, is that under review topics, students can look at the major concepts covered in that AP curriculum. So each of these 8 concepts is written into the Advanced Placement Human Geography course. When they go to review topics, as they're approaching a unit test in their class, let's say you go back to Unit 5, Cultural Patterns, and notice how under Unit 5, there are basically a review text. And so there's a lot of vocabulary that's elaborated on here. There's readings and pictures, sometimes even video. And then once students are ready to practice and get ready for that unit test, they can go to drills and then practice questions specifically for that big concept. So I have 2 drills in this course for concepts of culture. When I click Start, I'm going to see sampling of questions for that area. So basically, students can use this to practice for unit tests that they have in their own class. Now, in closing, as I go back to the dashboard, I want to preview the next video, which is more designed for teachers, and that is how do you use all of that drill and practice test information to start differentiating in your classroom. The next video is going to talk about Shmoop classrooms, how to set them up, and how to track student progress as part of a guided study of Shmoop resources.